Hi dear friends, this is Bob Hatton, this is the Encourager. Today we're going to finish our studies in Mark's Gospel. I already told you that Mark, actually his Gospel finishes with verse 8. And this book is actually a book without an end because although we got some more verses, Mark didn't actually write the ending that is in most of our Bibles. Mark, he finished verse 8 and then somebody else continued. Although these verses are not in the oldest editions of the Bible that we have, I do believe that God has put them there. They've been there for at least I would think about 1800 years. So, I think they've been confirmed that they are divinely inspired, and they're very interesting to read. Verse 19 finishes us by telling us that Jesus sat down at the right hand of God. He's returned to heaven. He was raised from the dead just on the third day after the crucifixion. He stayed with his disciples for 40 days and he told them other things that he'd not had time to tell them during the time he was with them. And after these 40 days, he left them. He ascended into heaven. And when he got to heaven, he took place at the right hand of the majesty of God, and he was crowned with glory and honor. That must have been a very exciting moment. Jesus has come home, and the angels would have been rapturous, and I'm sure God the Father was pleased to have him back with him after he had won the salvation of the whole of mankind. Dramatic story. And of course Mark's Gospel is coming to a close, but it's not really. It's an ongoing story. It's an everlasting story, and we are part of it today. And as Jesus is sitting down, his disciples are going out. They're spreading the gospel. And the gospel went all over the world. By the end of the first century, it was all through the Middle East. By the end of the second or the third century, North Africa was full of the gospel of Jesus Christ. It had moved over to the east and to the west of Europe. It also began to touch the coasts of the British Isles. It had gone to the east. Thomas had taken the gospel to India and the other disciples to many other places. It's spreading out. Now, at the end of the first century, John, he was the youngest of the disciples. He died, I suppose, around 90 or 100. And then a new generation of leaders arose. We call them the church fathers, and many great things had happened. Church history continued. Sometimes there was a lull, there was a downhill development, and then there's revival, and things spread up again, and the gospel continued to spread from the west, from Western Europe, went across the Atlantic Ocean to the Americas, to South America, also went south to Africa, east to Asia, and it's covered the whole earth. Today, there is not one single country in the whole world where there isn't a Christian witness, and that is something great. And all through the ages, people have been awakened, and they've been going out with a good message that Jesus saves, a good message that Jesus wants to give us new life, a good message that the gospel, it really is good news. Now, in the year 1786, there was a young man in England, a man called William Carey, and he was actually a cobbler. He used to make shoes and repair shoes, and he got a hold of a copy of a book by Captain James Cook. Cook was a sailor, he was in the Navy, and he discovered many things. He had discovered Australia, New Zealand. He'd made maps of these places. He showed people how to get there from Europe, how to navigate their way, and also he'd made studies of the people that he'd found there, he'd discovered there, and of course the animals and and the fauna and whatever things were growing there. He did extensive studies, and people went with him, scientists went with him, and they also wrote about this. And Curry read about these things, and he thought, people are living there, and these people do not know anything about the good news of Jesus. In the end, although he was very discouraged, people discouraged him not to do it, he decided he was going to leave England and he was going to go to India. When he got to India, it was also very, very discouraging. The East India Company didn't want him to land in the area. The British government, who were responsible for India as a colony, they refused to let him land in India, and he found a Danish enclave a little bit north of Calcutta, and there he was allowed to go and land. He'd learned himself Greek and Hebrew and Latin, and he began the task of learning the local language, Bengali, which was spoken there. And then he began the task of translating the Bible from Hebrew and Greek and translating it into the local language. In the end of his life, I think he had the Bible printed, or the New Testament printed, into about 9 different languages. But people they're simply not interested in the gospel of Jesus, in the good news of Jesus. And he was there for 7 years, and nobody was interested. Then in the year number 8, one person committed his life to Jesus, and 10 years later, there's about 500,000 people who were following Jesus in India. He planted churches, but he also founded universities. And not only universities, but schools for boys and girls, something unknown in that time. He transformed the society. He did studies in agriculture and many other things. He was a transformer. He was a man who was so gripped by the story of Jesus, as Matthew, Mark, Luke and John had recalled it to us. And he was a man who stepped into the story of Jesus, and although things were difficult and things were hard, he continued there and he made a difference. And what I want to ask us and what I want to challenge us is to make sure that we step into the story with Jesus. And sometimes it is difficult and sometimes we can be discouraged, but don't give up. Keep on going. Well, that's it for now. I wish you God's blessing. I wish that God is with you, and that I won't see you on Monday, but I'll see you hopefully on Tuesday. God bless you. You're Bob Hatton.